여러분 안녕하십니까? 2021 Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is the Pyeongchang Peace Forum 2021, a special session 3, held under the theme of peace building through energy cooperation in conflict areas in an era of climate crisis. I'll be your mistress of ceremonies. My name is Kim Min-hwae. Thank you very much for coming here despite your busy schedules and despite the very cold weather. We also have many participants joining us online. Thank you very much for being with us. This is the last session of today. We've been here for about 2 days now, and there were many discussions that we wanted to engage in. It's unfortunate that we don't have more time to explore our ideas. However, this is not the end. This is just the starting point in a very long process. So with that, we'd like to begin the last session. In this session, we're going to be discussing how the climate crisis is spreading rapidly over the world. And we want to talk about cooperative measures, especially in the fields of climate change and energy, in Gangwon-do province for the two Koreas. And through energy cooperation, we can think about ways to promote peace on the Korean Peninsula. I am personally very honored to be your mistress of ceremonies for this very important session. With that, I would like to hand over the microphone to our moderator, Choi Jae-chul, who is the president of the Bureau International des Expositions, BIE. He has worked at MOFA from 1981 to 2019. Currently, he is a professor at Inha University, KNDA, and Seoul National University, GSES. As I mentioned, he is the president of the Bureau International des Expositions and the co-director of the Climate Change Center. And now I'll hand over the microphone to him. Hello, I've just been introduced. I am Choi Jae-chul. I am the president of BIE. I would like to extend my congratulations to all the organizers of the Pyeongchang Peace Forum. And I am also very thankful to be given the chance to moderate this very important session. There are 7 presenters who will be talking today, including myself. There are about 5 people here offline, and there are also some people, 2 speakers in fact, who will be joining us virtually. Beginning on my left, we have Park Young-il, President of Research Institute for Gangwon, CEO and President Kim Sung-in of Gangwon Technopark, Yoo Seok-jae, President of the Korea Institute of Fusion Energy, and Lee Bong-ju, who is the Chairman of Green Science Co. We also have Dan Shaham, who is a Special Envoy in Science and Applied Research for the Government of Israel, and Yoo Yeon-chul, who is the Ambassador for Climate Change of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Korea. They will be joining us online. I would like to begin by giving a short presentation on responding to climate crisis and what Korea's role would be in the execution of the Paris Climate Change Accords.
So the topic of my presentation is the Paris Agreement for responding to climate change and the role of the Korean government. Why should we make collective efforts on the part of the international community to respond to climate crisis? So this is going to open the session as an introduction. I've spent a lot of time as a diplomat working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, working in the multilateral organizations, and I really take a lot of confidence and pride that for the Paris Agreement, for the adoption and leading up to the adoption of the Paris Agreement, I was there as the head of delegation for the negotiations leading up to the adoption of the Paris Agreement. And I want to share that experience with people over here. And I also published my journal on the climate change negotiations process. What I will talk about today is the internationalization or globalization of climate change agenda and the linkages between the global security and climate change. How did that discourse come about? And climate negotiations, whether that is purely based on politics or whether that is based on interactions between international politics and science. And in 2015, December 12, the Paris Agreement, the Accord, was adopted by the international community, which provides a framework for responding to climate change. And then I will move on to talk about the carbon neutrality goals for 2050, the net zero, how that is becoming an international issue, what is the role expected of Korea. First of all, climate change. When we discuss the issue of climate change, do we mean global warming or global cooling? There have been continued controversies, especially since the beginning of the 20th century. And at the World Climate Conference that was held for the first time, that climate change is about the global warming. So there were controversies which were put to an end. An IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was established to provide a framework for cooperation between scientists and politicians. Back then, considering the political dynamics, the first working group was led by the UK. The second working group was led by the former USSR, Russia, and the third one was led by the United States. And the first assessment report was published in 1990. And at the UN, from the Malta conference, the discussion for climate change began. People said that climate should be declared as a part of the common heritage of mankind. This was a proposal made, but many advanced countries expressed critical views. And at the United Nations General Assembly, they decided to go with the term, the common concern of mankind, to refer to climate. And this expression is still used for the Paris Agreement to this date. And at the United Nations in 1990, the UNFCCC was established for the intergovernmental negotiations on climate change. In 1992, at the Rio Summit, climate change agreement was adopted. And the first COP for the UNFCCC led to the adoption of the Kyoto Protocol. In 1997. So how did climate change, how is that now tie in with the security issues? So in 2007, about 10 years after the adoption of the Kyoto Protocol, the UK was the chair of the UN Security Council, which first dealt with, for the first time, climate change as a security issue for the global community. In IPCC 2007, the fourth evaluation report, which received a Nobel Award Prize, there was a talk about linking the water, agriculture, forests, energy, health, habitation, economy, which are all the threats, the areas were threatened by the climate change. And so this actually extended the scope of climate change to an area of global security. And with the new administration in the United States, they're looking at climate change as one of the key priorities for foreign affairs related policies as well as security policies. And it is actually a threat multiplier, as many people say, especially those regions without any strong national governance or, for example, famine-stricken areas or conflict areas. Climate change could become a threat multiplier that could bring about international crises. For example, the refugee crisis that we see out of Syria. And these are analysis statistics that I want to share with you, just for your reference. So, international negotiations. Negotiations just about simple talks between and amongst diplomats? No, it was based on science. When we first began the negotiations, the first IPCC report was published in 1992 at the Rio Summit. Climate change agreement was adopted, and through the Berlin Mandate in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto. And it was to be effectuated by 2001. But actually, in the Hague meeting in 2000, they weren't able to come up with the implementation book. The rules book work was postponed to the Madagascar meeting, and together with the IPCC second report, Kyoto Protocol rulebook was published at a later date. But this was only a success half complete, because there were many transitional countries. For example, 37 countries were involved in the process. But in 2001, when George Bush was the president there, he believed that climate change or the Kyoto Protocol could pose a serious threat to the economy. That is why the United States opted out of the agreement. So it was only success half complete. So there were many failures along the way in 2004, but in 2015, thanks to the efforts, the Paris Accord was adopted. And in 2018, in Songdo, IPCC 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming report was adopted. So the Paris Agreement is, in a way, an agreement that is trying to strike a balance between Annex 1 countries and Annex 2, because it was more about reduction for advanced economies and mitigation or adaptation for Annex 2 countries, and providing support from the advanced economies to developing economies in terms of capacity building and projects and programs and so forth. And climate action, climate support have to be embedded in the NDC, nationally determined contributions, which are to be submitted and declared every 5 years, and they have to go through stock taking process every 2 years, and they have to move towards net zero by 2050, and every 5 year global stock taking effort is to be implemented across the world. So the first stock taking, the official one, is going to be held in 2023. Now, the 2050 carbon neutrality goal. As I mentioned before, in 2018, October, IPCC 1.5 degrees Celsius, a special report on global warming, provides a basis for that. The IPCC provided a special report on global warming 1.5 degrees Celsius, which would threaten the ecosystem, water resources, sea level rise, and melting of the ice. That there is a higher increased risk of climate crisis. We're now even saying that we're seeing the era of climate calamities, going beyond just a crisis. So in 2019, the United Nations Secretary General convened the Climate Action Summit for the first time. And afterwards, the EU declared carbon neutrality and wanted to become a carbon-free territory. Green Deal. And Joe Biden, President of the United States, upon inauguration, declared his commitment to return to the Paris Agreement, and also CO2 elimination, so forth, various initiatives were put forward. And there's, of course, the talk about carbon border adjustment mechanism to engage every country in the process. So in few years, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is to be introduced, especially to deal with the asymmetries in carbon-related goods, to apply that border taxes. And our president declared a carbon neutrality goal last year. We're not Annex 1 country, but as a major economy, declare that Korea is to become net zero by 2050. This is very meaningful indeed. Now then, how can we move towards that path? And this can become a role model for the international community. That is why today's discussion is very important today. I'm going to finish my presentation. This was an introduction to our discussion, and I'm going to invite the second speaker, Mr. Park Young-il, to deliver his presentation. And after all the presentations are done, then we will open up the floor for discussions and Q&A. Thank you.
안녕하십니까. 방금 소개받은
Thank you very much. I am Park Young-il. I'm president of the Research Institute for Gangwon. I'm very honored and very pleased to talk about cooperation in the energy sector. As Dr. Choi just talked about the climate change. Climate change and security, these are directly linked with each other. They're very important issues, and they have wide repercussions not only on the economy as well as peace around the world, not only on the Korean Peninsula. I believe this is why we're having the session today on this very important topic. So I am going to take a look at the current energy industry and how energy cooperation can be linked to peace cooperation and also cooperation between the two Koreas. So let's take a look at the energy industries. There were issues, for example, of demand and supply. So how to, for example, reduce demand and how to meet the demand with affordable, cheap, and safe, secure energies, and how to strike a balance between demand and supply. That was why energy industry was important in the past, but the current situation is quite different. As was mentioned before, the climate change is posing a crisis, and that is actually changing the dynamics of the energy industries. And also starting from last year, the global pandemic has been sweeping the whole world, and that is also changing the very dynamics of the energy industry to an area unknown. And there are global discussions on restructuring the energy industry. Now, due to COVID-19, energy demand is actually moving in a completely different direction. How is that different from the past? For example, last year and this year, energy consumption and demand have been coming down. They have been leveling off at a very stable level. And also the CO2 emissions has declined. Unlike the former trends of the past, for example, CO2 emissions has to be controlled, but due to COVID-19, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that is actually having different type of impact on energy consumptions and demands. So at any rate, we will have to move our energy industry in a direction that will be future-proof. And we really have to work very hard to advance the implementation of the long-term low GHG emissions development strategy, or the LEDS. So coming back to the reality, energy industries, you can say that it is indeed an ability to work, gives the energy for industries to function. What are the tasks that we have to work on? And they draw a completely different picture for us, because with the climate crisis now underway, the CO2 emissions are going up, but energy industries are making various efforts to reduce that emissions, and really has to be accelerated, and energy demand has to be managed stably. And the future of the energy industry only can then be reshaped in a manner that we really want to envision, we want to see. So new and renewable energies have to be developed very fast, speedy manner. And energy industry has to contribute to a better quality of lives, and we have to at the same time deal with the energy poverty as well as political and economic issues. We have to come up with the right solutions and to bring the stability to the energy industry. These are some challenges that confront the energy industries right now. And also, there's a competition for hegemony over energy, especially around trans-border, trans-boundary areas to secure the energy sources. How can we go about resolving these issues in a peaceful manner? And how can we actually turn that as a tool for promoting cooperation? Such efforts have been around for quite a long time, but we have to accelerate that process. So the energy industry is now evolving in a different direction. It's quite different than the industry that we used to know 2-3 years ago. Sometimes the energy issue becomes a seed for conflict in transboundary areas. Along the border regions, the countries there are competing for energy resources, or in terms of joint development of the energy resources, we see competition and conflicts. Yes, we've had similar experiences as well before. But energy, just like economic cooperation, can become the seed for peace and cooperation. The Yemen and Saudi Arabia cooperation is a case and example. And also, in the past, energy was used as a medium to promote cooperation between the two Koreas through KEDO, Korea Energy Development Organization. Of course, there were political issues at play, but provided that North Korea is involved as a proactive participant in the process, the KEDO project was going to be beneficial. What about energy cooperation between the two Koreas? There were stark differences in terms of energy development in the two countries. This is the total energy supply and per capita energy, as well as installed capacity, as well as generation volume. There are a few data that I'm sharing with you over here. There's a lot of differences between the two, and also in terms of the type of supply, there are much differences between the two Koreas. Depending on of course, the two Koreas are in different stages of development. That is why we see such differences in terms of energy development. They have been mainly driven by the following factors. And there have been discussions on, for example, resolving the energy crisis in North Korea. Another approach that people have taken is to stabilize the energy demand and supply in South Korea, and also to use energy as a tool for promoting energy network cooperation in Northeast Asia. And to deal with energy crisis in North Korea, for example, there should be support for deforestation of DPRK and all power plants, and also to provide a breakthrough in terms of dealing with food crisis, water, as well as energy issues. And also cooperation projects were also discussed as well, and also were taken up as a research item for forest restoration. And from 1994 to 2002, light water reactor development project, the so-called KEDO project, was carried out, and it led to a lot of progress, but unfortunately was discontinued in midstream. And there was an energy and electricity supply discussions at the initiative of North Korea. And also there was a talk about importing resources and coals, and also natural gas import coming through North Korea from Russia to South Korea, and also Super Grid Initiative, Asia Super Grid Initiative, as well as green cooperation initiatives. These proposals were made in the past. So what do we need to do going forward? There have been a lot of experiences that have been built up so far. We have to make the inter-Korean cooperation more systematic. We have to start from small steps, and also to promote green détente, using energy as a very important foundation for bringing détente on the Korean Peninsula. An energy basic plan can be developed between the two Koreas. And the early energy model based on distributed energy, renewable energy, can also be forged to create more practical level of cooperation. And we can start the process at a private level first. We also have to take into consideration the actual end users, companies, so that they can make active investment in the DPRK energy systems. These are some of the research items. Green détente is not a term that I coined myself. It comes from the KAIST Future Strategies Regis Goal. Dr. Kim Sang-yeop proposed this idea. This is about responding to green revolution and climate change so that we can increase cooperation with North Korea, especially in terms of water resources, forest, and also environmental cooperation. So what can Gangwon Province do against this backdrop? Through energy cooperation, we can work to establish a peace realization model Of course, Gangwon is now trying to come up with a future vision for creating a peaceful, special governing province here. And the East Coast Energy Resource Belt, as well as Peace Region, economy and tourism belts are to be constructed in the initiative. And energy cooperation will play a pivotal role in this effort. And also clean energies will be used, and integrated grid will be used, which can be used by both DPRK and South Korea. And I know that there will be detailed presentations on hydrogen economy and hydrogen nuclear fusion. There are a lot of possibilities and potential that can be explored. And of course, we can use energy cooperation to further promote governance, combining the environment as well as economy, and the private sector researchers should come together to come up with a joint roadmap. And Gangwon Research Institute, RIG, and Pyeongchang Peace Forum have very important roles to play, especially for peaceful coexistence of Gangwon. We should undertake very important roles in opening the opportunities for cooperation. Thank you very much, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you, Dr. Park, President of the Research Institute for Gangwon. Thank you very much. As I mentioned before, questions will be taken all at the end of the presentations. Next, from UAE, Abu Dhabi, from IRENA, we have a special envoy in science and applied research, and from the government of Israel.
We will hear from Dr. Dan Sham. He will be joining us virtually.
Welcome and many thanks for joining us virtually. So we look forward to your insightful presentation. You have the floor, sir.
Shalom, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and be able to introduce not only what we are doing in Israel, but what we are doing in the Middle East, because as what you've heard, the world is going through major, significant climate changes, and we feel it. We feel it on a daily basis. We are now in winter time, and it has been very harsh summer, very dry summer, very hot, unusually hot. And then the winters, we get floods. We get heavy rainfalls in very short periods, which the earth cannot even absorb so quickly because it's dry, and then it's causing floods. So climate change affects us. As you've heard, also Syria has seen a war, which we understand has been to some degree or large degree affected by the drought that Syria has experienced. But we live in a region that everybody associates with energy, oil, gas, and conflict. So in some way or another, we are very much at the center of this energy and peace equation. So let me describe a little bit about Israel. We'll go over to the Middle East, and then maybe relate to what can be done to improve situation. As far as Israel is concerned, we had two, I would say, opposing or changes that we've experienced. One, we've discovered large quantity of gas in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, gas that we will use in Israel, and some of it we will export. The second thing is that we are progressing very rapidly as a sunny country towards having up to, now we are on the edge of 20% renewables, but by 2030, we aim for 30% renewables, mainly from the sun. We do not use wind, mainly the sun, and that is the goal. So while we have gas available, we prefer to increase the renewable share of our energy equation. On top of that, in Israel, we try to connect ourselves to the region. When I say the region, until now, Israel has been an energetic island in the sense that we were not connected to any one of the grids in the region. Our region, the Middle East, was unstable politically, and we had conflicts. But in the last 1977 and in the 90s, we have two peace agreements, one with Jordan, one with Egypt. And we were connected in some way. We imported gas from Egypt, but unfortunately, again, because of political instability, this gas was disconnected by terror attacks. But recently, we have established stronger links with Jordan to provide some of our gas to Jordan. And at the same time, we have initiated a pilot in which renewable energy that will be produced in Jordan, in which the real estate, the land is vast, the capacity to build large renewable PV fields is bigger than in Israel. Israel is a small country, so the areas that you need and the cost of land is higher to rent to whatever one contractor is needing. And we want to explore the possibility of buying renewable energy from Jordan. The cost of energy in Israel, renewable energy, is, I would say, about 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. It's a good price. These are the prices that we have received in the last bid. But if we need more water, and the Middle East needs more water, and we need energy as the key component in the cost of water, we want to explore the possibility of reducing this price even further. I'm not going to go into detail. This has to do with storage of renewable energy. This has to do with clean photovoltaic panels. This has to do with the cells themselves, that we can be more efficient. There's a lot of ways to increase the efficiency of renewable energy and reduce the price of renewable energy, and by that, reduce the price of water. We need more water in the Middle East because we have more people and less water. So by us focusing on the cost of renewable energy or energy as a whole, we are actually contributing significantly to peace in our region through the provision of water. Water for drinking, water for agriculture. We have growing population in the Middle East and less water. This is a given. So unless we produce more water, we're going to have more tension and less stability in the Middle East. But I want to touch upon one last point, and I'm sorry, and within the context of reducing cost and having more efficient energy, renewable energy, we were part of IRENA. We have established relations with the United Arab Emirates, a serious player in the world for renewable energy. They are the host of IRENA, the World Agency for Renewable Energy, and a major oil and gas exporter. So they are an excellent partner to, for example, to build an innovation center on energy. And indeed, this is something that we want in trilateral forums. We wanted, and we've agreed with Germany to explore the possibility of a trilateral agreement, or with the United States to have this kind of cooperation. So we do think and understand that the relations with the United Arab Emirates and Arab countries of the Gulf has to do, to a large degree, with being more innovative on the field of renewable energy and energy as a whole. So we want to focus. This will enhance the relations. This will make the relations much stronger. But until the day that we have cheap, totally renewable, zero emission, you name it, the paradise that we all hope that is going to happen. We also need to understand that the crisis, the climate crisis and the political crises that we have an impact here and now in the Middle East. We understand that. It's a given. It's not even a choice. It's not even a question mark, will it happen? And the question is, what do we do today? Because creating energy efficiency and renewable with all the costs and all the impacts that it carries is not a solution for the here and now. So we need to understand that humanitarian aid will also need to be a component. It's not fixing the problem, but it's tackling the ramifications of this crisis. So we can, it's going to get worse before it's going to get better. And we need to deal with this. If we are aiming for peace, we need to deal with what is going to happen in the interim period. And in the interim period, we are thinking seriously and engaging about an innovation center for humanitarian aid. Because it's not going to be only shipping bottles of water or very bulky humanitarian aid. We want to make aid a much more sophisticated, much more innovative, much more efficient aid. And this is our goal. So within the context of energy, we're working on long-term aspects and reducing the emission in Israel, creating better networks in the environment with Europe, with the Middle East, with Jordan, with the United Arab Emirates, increasing the innovative part of how we produce and how we use energy. But we also think that until things will be fixed in a way, we need also to deal with the ramifications in the here and now. Not only for this, but in general. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Densham, for your informative and very thoughtful message. Actually, your message is coming from epicenter of climate variability. I will go back to you with some questions after the all presentations. 감사합니다.
So thank you again. Next, we're going to invite CEO of Gangwon Techno Park, Kim Sung-in. I would like to ask him to introduce himself just briefly to talk about Gangwon Peace Train, liquefied hydrogen energy.
So I've just been introduced. I'm the CEO and president of Gangwon Techno Park. My name is Kim Sung-in. I'm very pleased to present on the Gangwon Peace Train here at the Pyeongchang Peace Forum 2021. The ROK government last year was able to restore the East Sea Northern Line for the first time in 53 years. And we refurbished this plan with the goal to complete by 2027. So this East Sea Northern Line would go past North Korea and go past Russia to China. And hopefully we want to try to create it similarly to the TCR railroad that goes, the Transcontinental Railroad that crosses over Moscow. But we also want to do this in an eco-friendly way as a hydrogen train, a liquid hydrogen train. And to that end, we also provided a presentation in the economy session at the Pyeongchang Peace Forum. We went over the economics and the political ramifications at that forum. But today, for this forum, I want to talk about the different technical aspects of this train and how these technical specifications can ultimately help us towards achieving peace in the international community. When it comes to hydrogen energy, as you very well know, its weight is quite low. It's very light energy, so its fuel efficiency is very light. So it's been used as rocket fuel from the 1960s. Hydrogen energy also is known for two major characteristics, that natural gas and fossil fuels have limited reserves, but hydrogen energy is unlimited in terms of its reserves. And as you can see here on the screen, when a space rocket is launched, a lot of smoke you see here, that's actually not smoke, but it's steam. Basically water vapors. So hydrogen energy is also very clean in that regard, which is why there's a lot of studies that have been conducted on the use of hydrogen energy. The hydrogen energy, if we were to burn this, combust it, then the heating point is quite low. So instead, water is added to this, and hydrogen and oxygen are converted into electrical energy. This is the thrust of the research that's been conducted over the last 60 years. However, recently we've seen some improvements in the economics and commercialization. So now we're seeing megawatt scale power stations where they use hydrogen energy, where they actually make and generate power. And even in the residences and even in industrial use, sometimes they use heaters and boilers that are powered by hydrogen energy. And hydrogen has become very popular because of their use in cars, in vehicles. So many people have come to know about hydrogen-powered vehicles. Hydrogen is produced in this way. There are two kinds of hydrogen, two forms of hydrogen that exist in the world. So one is where hydrogen can be taken out, derived from carbon, similarly to fossil fuels. And when you try to make carbon out of that, you can get carbon and CO2. CO2 obviously can threaten global warming. So this kind of hydrogen is referred to as gray hydrogen. However, when we do electrolysis, then we get water and oxygen. In this case, this energy is very clean, and the electricity that we use for this electrolysis, if we were to use solar power or wind energy, then it's going to be completely completely green energy, in which case this can be used and deployed anywhere. We just heard from Dr. Dan Shaham, who said that their water scarcity is very severe in Israel, but for this particular energy, if you just have sun and a little bit of wind, then you can have green hydrogen anywhere in the world. We in Gangwon-do province are particularly focused on liquid hydrogen, and let me explain why. Just simply, liquid hydrogen is similarly to LPG. They're all liquefied forms of fuel, so you have to transport them. If we were to transport hydrogen in its gasified form, then we have to use what we call tube trailers. For the tube trailers, the 16-meter tube trailer has to travel for about 300 kilograms, and that's enough to charge 50 Nexo cars. So this huge 60-meter tube trailer would have to be transported around just to charge 50 Nexo cars. But if we were to liquefy this hydrogen, then we can compress it furthermore and be able to expand the capacity tenfold. In the relation between Gangwon province and liquid hydrogen, just last year, the Gangwon province was designated as a special zone for liquid hydrogen. Pyeongchang, Samcheok, Donghae, Gangneung, 4 cities in Gangwon province were designated as special zones for liquid hydrogen. So in terms of production and storing and making valves and creating different components in the use of liquid hydrogen and the charging infrastructure, the use of liquid hydrogen, or the tubes and the tube trailers and the trains that I mentioned before, these 4 cities have been designated as these special zones. So we would be free of some regulation and we will see more investment in terms of technology development. I did mention the liquid hydrogen train earlier on. If the hydrogen is going to be transported in its gasified form in the train, then if we were to keep about 300 kilograms of hydrogen here, we would need 5 tanks with a length of 12 meters. But if we were to liquefy this hydrogen, we only need 3 tanks. And more importantly, the time it takes for the charging is significantly cut. If you want to charge 100 kilograms for gas hydrogen, it takes 60 meters. So let's say if the train, this is a high-speed train that has to travel at a speed of 300 kilometers per hour across the continent, but if it takes 60 minutes to recharge 100 kilograms, that is going to be too long. However, for a liquefied hydrogen train, it only takes 15 minutes to charge 100 kilograms. So that's enough time just waiting for the passengers to get off and get back on again. Right now, we are working together with the private sector partners at Hyundai Rotium. Gangwon-do province, because we have been designated a special zone, we have an on-site liquid hydrogen production station where we use wind and solar power to break down water through electrolysis and create a green charging station. This is very significant because liquid hydrogen is seeing a lot of global movers, global players in this field. But for liquid hydrogen, you have to transport it very well. So the big companies have to produce 5 tons or 30 tons a day. Gangwon province will need a sort of a mid-scale production capacity, about 300 kilograms. And we believe that Gangwon province can provide that solution because we don't have any of those mid-scale production volumes anywhere else in the world. So we can be the solution. We will start in Gangwon province, go past China to Russia, hopefully even to Europe. And this TSR and TCR can be connected. If that can happen in Gangwon province, this Gangwon Peace Train will be making use of on-site produced liquid hydrogen. And this would ultimately contribute to world peace. Lastly, you would see this slide here, Governor Choi Moon-soon of Gangwon province giving a presentation at the Blue House at the Republic of Korea, invited by the president, where he presented this presentation. So he said that we're here not to sell potatoes to you, but to sell liquid hydrogen. Through this liquid hydrogen train, we can connect with the TSR, and especially in this era of climate crisis, we can go through these conflict regions through a completely green, clean energy train. And this would allow Gangwon province to really make its strong debut in the world stage. Thank you. Thank you very much. CEO and President Kim Sung-in of Gangwon Technopark. That was a very hopeful message.
Next, we're going to invite Dr. Yoo Seok-jae, who is the president of the Korean Institute of Fusion Energy, to provide us with a presentation on ultimate alternative for climate change, nuclear fusion energy. Hello? I am from Korea Institute of Fusion Energy. I'm the director of the institute. Yu Seok-jae. I'm very delighted to and honored to have this opportunity to talk about nuclear fusion energy at this very important forum. And Dr. Kim, my previous speaker, just talked about the hydrogen energy, and nuclear fusion energy is one of such energies. To put it differently, for example, the hydrogen fuel cells, you use hydrogen chemical energies for such application, but what I will introduce to you today is how this nucleus of the hydrogen can be fused together to create a lot of energies. So the process of the fusion of nuclear energy. So the hydrogen energy combines both the chemical energies as well as the nuclear fusion energies. Only then the hydrogen energy can be a complete form of energy. Here we're talking about the issue of climate change and what would be the role expected of nuclear fusion energy. So let me begin the presentation in the following manner. First, I'm going to give you a perspective of global energy, or what is nuclear fusion. I will give you a definition for this, and global R&D collaboration, and examples and practices for fusion energy, and how to drive the development of fusion energy. And then I will finish off my presentation with some proposals and recommendations. So as our lives become more improved, then of course there's a higher demand for energy. People consume a lot of energy in the process. But the problem is that we're seeing the challenge posed by climate change, especially the coals or oil or gases. These fossil fuels are not to be used any longer. And we have to move away from such traditional forms of energy. So we have to come up with a viable option. And at the same time, we have to provide energy to meet the demands of consumers. So those are some big issues, which are also leading to a lot of regional conflicts in the world. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is now unfolding before our eyes. And even with a COVID-19 pandemic here with us, affecting us, and the fourth industrial revolution-related technologies have done their part, and their roles are going to become even more important. Now, various technologies that are being used in this era of the fourth industrial revolution, they make more use of electrical energy rather than thermal energy. Now, of course, CO2 emissions will be minimized and will have to be minimized, and at the same time supply more electrical energy. That is a big homework that we're trying to solve. So photovoltaic energy and wind power, renewable energies and nuclear energies could be thought of as options, and also nuclear fusion energy, the topic that I want to address today. But as for renewable energy, it depends on local conditions and also the environment where the resources are developed because of intermittence. There's a lack of stability and security in terms of providing the baseload energy for consumers. But for nuclear power, of course, there's an issue of radioactive waste as well as safety concerns in terms of the operation of the power plants, and also there are stereotypes in society and also technical issues that are quite challenging. So it may not be such a sustainable source of energy going forward. That is why a lot of people are now looking to fusion energy, that it would be an ultimate, one of the means for dealing with energy demands in the fourth industrial revolution era, especially when there's a lot of use for electricity going forward. it could be a good solution for that time. And it could also mean positive news for responding to climate change. But before we begin that discussion, what is fusion energy? Now we have deuterium and tritium, which are merged to create helium and also energy. So in nuclear power, you have uranium nucleus, which are then divided and go through the fission process to create energy. So uranium is probably as big as a watermelon, but the hydrogen is very small, small as a bean. So we're making these small bean type of energies to generate energies. And so fission is about dividing this energy up. First starting with the big watermelon and trying to make it into smaller pieces. But of course, there are going to be wastes that are generated as a result of producing these energies in different forms and in different sizes. As you can see from the slide here, now you have these reactors where the fusion takes place and heat will be generated. The electricity will be produced by heating up water. That is a very general pattern that you see in coal-fired power plants as well as in nuclear power plants. But the biggest difference is that for the feedstock, water from sea is used. That there's an abundant amount of sea, the water resources, because of course the countries that do not have their own sea, they will go to the open seas to get water. And for countries with seas surrounding them, they can have an easy access to these water resources. The conflicts came in the past between the countries with resources and without resources in terms of imbalances in allocation of resources. This was actually naturally provided or given by nature. So countries were very much in competition for securing technologies. And of course, depending on the technology transfers, we can seek solutions for such conflicts. So we have high density when it comes to nuclear fusion in 1 million kilowatts production for the soft coals. About 2 million tons will have to be used as feedstock, but for fusion energy, only about 10 tons. So 45 liters of seawater will be needed to produce about 40 tons, or energies that would be as equivalent to 40 tons of coal. Given this issue, in 1985, the former President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, and Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the USSR, met during the Cold War, but putting the political issues aside, the two leaders decided to promote cooperation on energy cooperation called ITER, or ITER, International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. The United States, Europe, Japan, Russia, China, India, and Korea got involved in the process. So 7 largest powers in terms of nuclear fusion came together to implement the project. It is to have the distribution of the manufacturing or fabrication of the parts, and they would all be assembled together in the Paris site. Because of the accumulation of technology, that's very important. So countries would be involved in different phases of the development. And in the southern area called Catarash city, about 70% of progress rate has been achieved for the construction project. In the southern city of France, it is to be completed by 2025, and by 2035, mass production of nuclear fusion energy will be carried out. By 2025, the completion of the construction is scheduled, and from 2025 to 2035, large amount of nuclear fusion energy will be produced. And by 2050, electricity will be produced from this site. And 2050 is very important as a year because that is a milestone year for achieving net zero, carbon neutrality. So we have a demonstration underway What is really important is not the resources, but technologies. How technology is going to be shared amongst countries. That's where we are in terms of the project implementation. Coming back to the issue of nuclear fusion energy, because it uses seawater as a feedstock, it will completely restructure the hegemony of energy. Countries had to have, for example, big land and territories, but the countries with the right technologies to transform seawater into energy, those countries will emerge as powerful energy countries. And such energy-related technologies can be shared so that we can reduce the risk of energy conflicts. And we're expecting to see such positive results at the end of the project. And thank you very much. And this concludes my presentation. Dr. Yu from the Korea Institute of Fusion Energy, thank you for your presentation.
외교부 유연철
Next, we're going to invite Ambassador for Climate Change, Deputy Minister from MOFA, Ambassador Yu.
예, 저
Hello.
참석해 주셔서
Thank you very much for joining us today. Can you begin your presentation? I was going to be there physically, but I had some schedule conflicts and I wasn't able to go to Pyeongchang in person. So I ask for your kind understanding. So when it comes to the issue of climate change, I think people try to tie that in with energy, but we're trying to link that further to peace. And I think Pyeongchang Peace Forum is the first forum in doing that. And I hope that PPF will be able to provide the connection and is actually becoming a very important platform for connecting those different elements together. So thank you very much for your kind invitation. The beginning of this session, Dr. Choi said that climate change begins with science and technologies at the end of the journey. And also from the energy, from Korea Institute of Fusion Energy, Dr. Yu said the country with the power of transforming seawater into energy will become a powerful nation. We have a lot of hope for that. The ITER project is going to be completed by 2025, and mass production will be available by 2035. And the 2050 carbon neutrality initiative undertaken by the Korean government doesn't really deal with nuclear fusion energy. So perhaps at a certain point in time, nuclear fusion-related elements will hopefully be included in the carbon neutrality master plan. Before I begin my presentation, so as you understand, the severity of climate change has been talked about, but now we're no longer talking about climate change, we're talking about the climate crisis. Last year, for example, Bangladesh, the land, 1/3 of that was flooded, and Californian wildfires burned lands 30 times as large as the area of Seoul, and also the extreme Saudi Arabia, known for its hot desert, had snow for the first time in 50 years. So we're saying that the climate crisis is really posing a serious threat to humanity. It is threatening the survival of our humanity. Because our survival is at stake, it is directly linked to security of any nation. So the Biden administration clearly understood this point, because climate change is now at the center of its national strategies. The impact of climate change. Well, the countries with high income or low income, they're evenly affected, but in terms of response to climate change, depending on the level of income as well as capacity, impact is going to be different. Especially countries that are living in the conflict regions, they're very vulnerable to climate change, especially the vulnerable groups of society. The women and children are very affected by this. That is why Korea is really looking to see more support coming from the international community for vulnerable groups of society. In July of last year, Green New Deal was announced by the Korean government. In the COVID era, now for humanity to be healthy, but for us, for our health, our world has to be healthy as well. The globe, the earth has to be healthy. And also the government focused on strengthening the social safety net. Green New Deal, Digital New Deals are to be implemented together with the Social New Deal. and to make sure that nobody's left behind in the process of economic transition and social transition by strengthening the social safety net and also strengthening vocational training as well. And also GGGI, which is based in Korea, and also from Green Climate Fund. We're trying to utilize these mechanisms to provide support and work very closely with the international community for developing economies. And also there's UNCCCD, which is a UN convention to combat desertification. Together with UNCCCD, we began the Peace Forest Initiative in 2019, which is PFI. This involves countries with high conflict risks, areas vulnerable to those natural disasters, and joint forest cooperation projects for promoting peace. This is a global initiative. For example, Peru and Ecuador, they decided to create a peace park in the once conflict region, which led to better peace and cooperation between the two countries. We believe that such forest initiative will go a long way towards responding to climate change and also conflict resolution. Previous speakers talked about Green Detente and Green Korean Peninsula, talked about the importance of energy cooperation. I think this initiative has a very strong implications for those initiatives. Lastly, from the 30th to 31st of May this year, Korea is going to host the second P4G summit to promote inclusive carbon neutrality and also green transition in cooperation with the international community. P4G stands for Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030. So this means that we're working to promote global green growth and also Global Goals 2030. And this is to accelerate the process for achieving SDGs and also responding to climate change. This was a global initiative at the Initiative of Denmark, launched in September 2017. And P4G involves various stakeholders, including companies as well as civil society organizations, as well as the government. It is a diverse platform because in the international community there were silos involving the government, businesses, and civil society, but P4G involves all different stakeholders to talk about the importance of action. So it is very special in that way. Also, PPP, public-private partnerships, are to be pursued in various areas, such as those 17 different goals under the SDG, especially related to climate change. There are 5 different areas that are related to climate change. In the area of climate crisis, they include 3 strategic resources: food, water, and energy, the nexus, and cities and circular economy. These 5 areas are picked as cooperation projects, and especially food, water, energy, security. These 3 areas as strategic resources are areas that require cooperation because they will go a long way towards preventing conflicts preemptively and accelerating the process towards a sustainable development. So I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce to you P4G to be held in the near future. We ask on that note for your continued participation and support and also interest. And also in terms of promoting conflict prevention, resolution, and peace, the spirit and the method of cooperation envisioned by P4G could give us a lot of implications. Thank you very much, and this completes my presentation. Thank you very much, Ambassador. So in the first half of this year, the second P4G summit will be held in Korea. He gave us a background talk for the P4G. Thank you very much.
하신 분들 중에 유일하게 기업을
So lastly, we have the only representative in the panel who is from a private sector. Lee Bong-ju is the chairman of Green Science Co. is going to be talking about plasma gasification for the production of green energy and hydrogen. Thank you. I've just been introduced. My name is Lee Bong-ju. I'm the chairman of Green Science Co., but I'm also a professor at Handong University, so the presentation that I'm going to give to you is very scientific. very technical because it uses advanced science and technology. This is a kind of technology that I work together with my students and with my staff to develop. We often talk about green energy, and some people have an understanding of green energy and green electricity and green power, but I don't think that many people have a good level of understanding of green hydrogen. In Korea, we are not using green hydrogen because we don't have access to green hydrogen. In Europe, particularly in countries like Germany, they use some bits of green hydrogen, but the vast majority of the hydrogen used around the world, over 90%, are what we call gray hydrogen. We know that hydrogen is clean, but the process of producing hydrogen is actually very dirty. And so the hydrogen that we do use require the use of carbon dioxide that is 10 times the weight of hydrogen produced. So we should be aware of that. But today in my presentation, I want to talk about the role of plasma and gasification. Using plasma gasification, we can potentially develop green hydrogen no matter what the context. Plasma is something that we can see all around us. In fact, it is a material that we use all the time, like air, but we don't really know. I think now some people know what plasma is, but until recently it was not very well known. Just very briefly, it is the fourth state of matter after liquid gas and solids. About 99% of the universe is made of plasma, which shows you that 9% of the universe is made of plasma. So you would see that it is all around us. The neon signs and the billboard signs make use of plasma. Gasification is another very complex term. When we use fossil fuels, there are three ways that we can use to create power. One is pyrolysis. The other is gasification, and the third is combustion. The biggest difference about these three ways is the level of oxidization of the different energy sources. For gasification, there's very low levels of oxygen, but you can still produce energy. With combustion, it is the opposite. There's a lot of oxygen, so you can create a lot of carbon dioxide in the process. The fact that we can do gasification means that we can effectively reduce the use of CO2 as much as we can. We are trying to go towards gasification, and the CO2 that's derived out of this, we want to use that again as a feedstock, and that is what we want to make use of. And this can only be possible if we use plasma. So that is why we came up with this phrase, plasma gasification, which can enable the development of green hydrogen and green energy overall. In Taebaek, in Gangwon-do province, we are erecting this plasma gasification plant, a plasma power plant, which is the first of its kind in the world. We're going to use biomass, particularly wood bark, which will then gasify to create electricity, which is green energy. And through gasification, we're also going to create hydrogen. So with this green hydrogen, we hope to really revolutionize this, and the plant, we have slated construction until the completion by next month, and perhaps in April we will be able to sell power. And with hydrogen as well, we are currently constructing the relevant facilities, so we're going to create a green hydrogen beginning in July. And so we are also looking at the use of waste or plastics, which is really harmful to the environment. how we can use this to create hydrogen. By doing so, we can protect the environment, and also we can produce green hydrogen in the process. This is a technology that is really very much in demand, not just in Korea, but around the world. So we are really interested in this and have been developing this technology for about 10 years or so. We are at the stage where we can see a commercialized power plant come out. This will be year 0 in that regard. All of the different plastic waste, but all wastes that we see around us, through the use of plasma, we can convert them into green energy. And this is not just a vague dream, but this year is actually year 0, year 1, where we can commercialize the production of this kind of technology and this kind of energy. For plasma power plants, we actually use plasma in an older technology called IGCC, but we believe that using plasma can enhance this process, so we call it PEIGCC, or Plasma Enhanced Integrated Gasification Combined Cycle. All of these different materials and substances have been broken down into plasma, gasified as plasma, and we use this to operate gas engines or convert them into hydrogen to produce hydrogen. This is a kind of a power plant that we are envisioning. And another thing that I mentioned earlier is using plastics, waste plastics, which are particularly damaging to the environment, but we can convert those materials as well using the same process and the same technology, breaking them down, going through a thermal breakdown, reform the gas, and purify and make it clean, use that in gas engine, and even ultimately produce green hydrogen. We are about to finalize this technology as well. Lastly, I want to touch upon something that I already said in the first part of my presentation, which is that most of the hydrogen that we use, in fact over 90% of the hydrogen that we use, comes from LNG. Or they come as a byproduct in petrochemical industries. So you need 10 kilos of CO2. You have to emit 10 kilos of CO2 to create 1 kilo of hydrogen. So it's a very ironic sort of energy. But if we use this plasma gasification technology, using methane or other gases, we can make sure that we don't need to emit carbon dioxide or carbon emissions. If we use plasma, they can operate as a fuel. We use a steamer, and likewise as in using steamer to break down the particles, we can do so with this green hydrogen steamer. When we create hydrogen, because there will be no emissions of carbon dioxide, we believe that this is really a green hydrogen in the true sense of the word. The methodology for this is, as I mentioned before, using plasma. Green hydrogen production from LNG would go in this way. The LNG will be put to H2 and CO to H2 conversion. This would occur simultaneously with PSMR, and if we put that back in the plasma torch, then hydrogen would be produced from here. This can be done without the emission of carbon dioxide. In creating green energy, what is really important is the actual feedstock, actual fuel. Thus far, we've been depending on carbon and fossil fuels and coal. That has wrecked the environment. And also, we are creating so much waste, especially plastic waste, that is devastating the environment. These wastes and garbage and plastics will continue to be with us as long as humans roam this planet. So, we want to, if we can find no solution out of not using them, perhaps we can come up with another solution, maybe use them to convert them to energy in a green way. And that would also allow for these waste materials to be sustainable sources of energy. Through these different technologies that I mentioned in my presentation, we can make use of different kinds of feedstocks, especially waste, especially plastic waste. We can turn them into green sources of energy. In fact, if we were to use all of the waste coming out of Korea and convert that into electricity, we can create 80% of the country's power needs. Right now, we are importing a lot of oil and gas from overseas, but we no longer would have to do that. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Lee Bong-ju, chairman of Green Science
우리가 이 발표
Co.
동안에 심플로우를 통해서
Through this presentation, we've had a lot of questions and comments. So
질문들 중에 우리 연사님들이 좀 생각해봐야 될
I would like to ask some questions
제가 연사님들이 생각하실 동안에
and give some time for our presenters to respond to that.
질문들 중에 제가 같이 한번 공유해보자 하는 질문이
These are some of the questions that I would like us to think about.
힘들 것 같습니다.
With climate change, it's very difficult to find any short-term results or short-term achievements, which is why it's also difficult for us to really understand the severity of climate change. What can we do about this? And also, inter-Korean energy cooperation is very important. Can we also do that on renewable energy, not just energy, other kinds of energy? Can we do inter-Korean energy cooperation in an environmentally friendly way? And what is the progress made on that front? The next question is in English. K-Star nuclear fusion energy has been mentioned.
So
공유해도 되는 건지요?
would it be really viable for us to share these technologies as part of inter-Korean cooperation? And nuclear fusion energy, isn't it still in the nascent stage of development, still relatively underdeveloped? And coal and oil, conventional system, for example, what does it mean for these people that are working in the conventional industries? There was also a request for resolving issues regarding fine dust. Okay, so I've already posed these questions to you, so I'd like to ask our speakers to respond.
Hello, Dr. Tensham, can you hear me? You are the special envoy, Israeli special envoy attached to the IRENA. I am very happy to hear that IRENA is doing very well because I personally engaged in the negotiation for the establishment of IRENA in 2008 and 2009. During a relatively short period of time, you made a remarkable achievement in linking public diplomacy to the regional energy cooperation. Based on your experience and expertise, can you share some lessons which can be applied to Northeast Asia? Northeast Asia is also like Middle East countries, a region of diversity, political and economic diversity. So, would you share with us?
Thank you. Let me turn it off. Thank you for the questions, and I have to say that I've really learned a lot from the presentation, so thank you very much for all the presenters, both on the scientific level and on the political level. We have a lot to learn from you, really, technology-wise and innovation-wise. I really admire the spirit of the South Korean, and at the same time, the spirit of wanting to reach out and build the bridges. It really is the same feeling here in Israel. We want to bridge to our neighbors, which we feel are very close to us, the Arabs and Jews, both the children of Abraham. And this agreement with the United Arab Emirates and with Morocco and Sudan and Bahrain is called the Abrahamic Accord. So I think the first thing is the concept of having a shared understanding of the past. And we're looking into 3,000 years of Abrahamic heritage as far as we're concerned. Islam also relates to Abraham. And that is important for building some sort of a shared legacy. A shared legacy can be, how shall I say, not strong enough, because at the end of the day, we need to deal with real life problems on the here and now. So just signing a statement or having some dialogues is not enough. Because we are dealing with real issues, The ambassador, my colleague, spoke about calamities and issues that we see around the world, and especially in our region. That understanding that something needs to be done and quickly is not a given. Sometimes decisions to be taken seem to be the prerogative or luxury of the richer nations, like Korea and Israel. And that rich and that poorer nations are only surviving. That the issue of survival is so immediate that they don't think about fission and fusion energy and plasma. For them, this is something out of their scope of understanding. They just survive. People survive from day to day. So part of the lessons that we had to use, and this is our national anthem, is the hope. I know that it sounds a bit cliche, but people who are in a survival don't have a lot of hope. And when it's for long periods of time, they lose hope. So the issue of hope, because if we're just coming with a very, how shall I say, very matter-of-fact technological innovation, and we are strong, for them, it's like, how do I bridge from where I am today, that I'm surviving, to have food on the table for my children and water to put into my field, into what you're talking to me about clean energy? The gap is very big for them. And we're not going to make peace with ourselves. We're making peace with our neighbors, with people who are in a different state from us. So the issue of hope is central. Hope, and how do you produce hope in a way, is something that is not about just a statement. It's about something that you bring children from day one, that there is hope for a cleaner, greener, healthier, wiser environment. Hope is such a fundamental concept that for us, what you're talking about is something that we start in a very early age. Because if you have hope, you have aspiration, and then you become very innovative. If you do not have hope, you do not become innovative. Innovation starts and peace starts when you have hope. And that hope is a beginning in early childhood, in a way. I know it takes us away from very technological, but technology starts with people. And people are motivated by hope that things can be better. So this is what we have learned. These are the lessons that we have with our Arab nations. And I'm so happy because now we can take your technology, bring it to the Middle East, start improving things, having cheaper energy to produce water, and then we can start having hope so that children do not need to struggle just to have a glass of clean water, but move forward and have dreams and have hopes. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your very insightful comment. Actually, talking each other or tackling the real issues is also the moving away for building the trust and confidence among countries. Once again, thank you very much for your presentation and your wonderful answer. Now we will go to our participant. 이번에는 먼저 우리
So I would like to first start with Mr. Lee Bong-ju. So do you have any comments to make for the questions that were posed?
간단하게들 해주시면 되겠습니다. 이미 저희가
Yes, we are already a little behind schedule, so you can keep your comments very briefly.
I want to say first thing to Dr. Shum. I think the tangibility of hope is science. I believe so. 제가 답변 드리고 싶은 질문 중에 하나는 그 화석 연료 사업에 종사하시는 오일이나 석탄.
I think there was a question posed to me, perhaps by somebody working in the fossil fuels or oil and gas sector. They have expressed their concern to me. But if we can continue to work together to create these green energy solutions, then I think even the oil and gas sector would have a role to play because they can transition into making green energy. So perhaps these different stakeholders can persuade their companies to come around into green energy transition.
So can I respond to one of the questions? Also your closing remarks as well, just briefly. Yes, there were two questions from the floor. Whether energy cooperation is possible in terms of fusion energy fusion, because the development is still lacking. That it is still only in the nascent stage of development. So let me address those questions first. In terms of energy cooperation between the two Koreas, I believe that the most essential part that we should consider is that it should not be diverted for military purposes. For example, use that as a weapons development means. But what we want to realize in terms of energy fusion or nuclear fusion, the technology that we're developing cannot be used for military purposes or cannot be used as a weapons development. So technology sharing or opening our technology-related know-how, using that and sharing that with one another, believe is possible with North Korea. We can really move in a very positive direction because our two Koreas, in terms of the development of nuclear fusion energy, have strengths to offer for each other. Also, there was a question regarding the fact that there is a lack of development for fusion energy. But there's the ITER project underway. 70% of the project has been completed. That's an international project for nuclear fusion. And once that project becomes fully operational, we'll be able to verify the feasibility of the nuclear fusion. Then, of course, that could lead to a successful launch of the nuclear fusion energy for commercialization. So by 2035 or 2038, verification process will be completed. and afterwards, the energy will be converted into electricity. We just need to have that milestone technology there. And once we have that technology, then we'll be able to mass produce energy for the people. Ambassador Yu, would you like to make closing comments?
간단히 부탁드리겠습니다.
Just briefly, please. In terms of having a short-term solution to climate change, what can we do to raise public awareness? Yes, when it comes to responding to climate crisis, we have to understand that investment will have to be made for a long term. We don't really see any visible results right away, so that's very difficult for people that are involved in the process. It's having an embedded carbon or internalization of carbon price will be very important. Once that is embedded in everything that we do, for example, your carbon footprint can be translated into cost for you so that you understand the severity and the seriousness of carbon problems.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kim?
그 남북 철도
So I mentioned TSR and TCR in my presentation, and that obviously we would have to go over some political hurdles to make that a realization. But as I mentioned before, if we only have the sun, if we have the wind, and we have seawater, then we do have the wherewithal to create all of these different equipment and infrastructure to create a cheaper hydrogen. So that over the next 2 years, when Gangwon-do will be a special zone for liquid hydrogen, then we can come up with more liquid hydrogen solutions. Thank you very much.
에너지 협력을
Dr. Park? Yes, when it comes to energy cooperation, we have to have 4 conditions in place. First of all, we have to have good ideas. And second, there has to be strong drive and commitment to implementation. And third, there has to be an enabling environment. And fourth, you have to have an implementation mechanism in place. There have been a lot of ideas put forward for energy cooperation between the two Koreas, but it was including even not so eco-friendly energies. We just need to change the subjects. So enabling environment, implementation mechanism, these 2 areas are the problems that we have to work on. That is why we're organizing such a wonderful forum as PPF to provide that platform for dialogue. So we need to have a strong mechanism, and we have really a strong role to play in that regard. And I think we should really come together towards that goal. We need your engagement as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm just going to make some closing remarks.
Many people say that energy transition is the key in this climate crisis. 87% of greenhouse gas emissions in Korea come from energy. And IPCC's 5th report also say that this man-made climate change or man-made greenhouse gas emissions, especially derived from fossil fuels, are really the culprit behind climate change. Since the 1970s and 2010, 78% of greenhouse gas emissions were coming from CO2, specifically in the industrial sector, which is why it's very important for us to achieve energy transition in various sectors, not least the industrial sector. I think that the presentations had a lot of implications for all of us. And with that, I would like to thank all of the participants and the audience members for tuning in. And with that, we'd like to close special session 3. I'd like to hand over the mic to the MC. Yes, thank you very much to all of the panelists for participating with us in special session 3. This is the 3rd PPF, Pyeongchang Peace Forum, which is held under the theme of Peace Here and Now. We want to identify the different crises confronting Korean Peninsula and the world. Especially in this session, we're talking about the climate crisis. We are going through different challenges because of COVID-19, and yet many audience members have been with us both online and offline, so thank you very much. We do have another session tomorrow, so we hope to see you then for more enjoyable discussions and presentations. With that, we would like to conclude our session. My name is Kim Min-hye. Thank you.